So this is Nice Wonder. I'm here at the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops National Conference taking place this year at the LA Trade Tech College. I'm here with Kali Akuno from Cooperation Jackson. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
And tell me a little bit about your background first, and then we'll talk about Cooperation Jackson.
Well, I mean, for most of your viewers, there may be a good number of you in the audience who know me. I'm originally from Los Angeles, born and primarily raised here. My family was on the move at different points in time, but went to Linwood High School.
Oh, when did you?
Yeah, graduated class in 1990. And lived most of my, kind of formative years in Linwood and in Watts. I was born in Watts on Corrosis Avenue. I know the place well. I haven't really lived here since graduating from high school. But family's still here and here often, at least once a year, typically, not more. And still very much interested in the social movements here and the developments here. But even then, I knew my calling was going to be in making a return back to the South. As both sides of my family were part of that kind of great migration wave here. One side of the family during the Great Depression, the other side right after World War II.
Yeah.
And then the generations, my parents' generations, them coming of age, being born in the 40s after the war. And then part of the social movements, here in Los Angeles in the 50s, 60s, and 70s.
Yep.
And I'm a child of that kind of continuing thread that kind of took place here in LA. And that consciousness really has shaped, the experience I had here in the 70s and 80s. Not only shaped who I am, but it's still shaping the work that I do.
So now you're in Jackson, Mississippi. What does your work consist of right now?
Well, as I put it, I'm in one part of a small project to take over the city of Jackson.
Oh wow! How's that?
I mean, that's our aim and objective. We don't hide from that. We're trying to radically transform the city socially, politically, economically. I spend most of my time, but not all of my time, concentrated primarily in one area, which Cooperation Jackson is grounded in, and that is building up the solidarity economy and trying to, in the course of that building up, transform our system to one of economic democracy.
Excellent.
To lay a material foundation that will benefit the vast majority of working people and the vast majority of people who are now excluded. So most of my work, entails helping other working class people self-organize and develop worker cooperatives. So that is kind of the day-to-day work in different forms and facets. Some of my work as kind of the director of one division of the work is trying to raise funds, trying to train people in how to actually own and operate an operation, a business. So it's grinding, grueling work, sometimes not that rewarding, but at the end of the day, I think we're making some strides at actually creating an economy, in a local economy, where there's substantial worker control over the economy. We aim over the course of the next years and decades to not only scale that up to make sure that the vast majority of the economy is in worker direct control, but that we displace the exploitative systems that exist around us and replace those with life-affirming systems.
That's fantastic, because that's one of the things that attracted me to the movement, was the fact that it literally forces a mindset to care about people before everything else.
Right.
Yeah, and you'll figure everything else out, and then people, as you know, are complicated as it is, but we have to start there, because it just should be common sense. How did we ever get ourselves to thinking that material things, money and profits, are more important than people? Is beyond me, but
we were kind of forced into that relationship.
Yeah.
Let's not forget, many of us were I would say the vast majority of us were forced into that relationship, either from
Yes.
the colonization of this continent,
That's right.
the stealing of labor from folks from Africa, the stealing of labor from here.
Yes.
As
The
many
poor folks too.
and poor folks are going to bring them up. So it's not like we entered into this system, most of us willingly. We're kind of dragged along, forced along.
Yep.
But we have to exercise our own agency to change it, and we have to do it with some urgency.
Yes.
Because this system, the capitalist system, is destroying our planet.
That's
and
right.
We need to make some serious course correction, and immediately, if we're expecting complex life on this planet to continue, namely our own.
That's absolutely right. So in working, are you focused primarily just on the city of Jackson, or in the state?
At this stage,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
But we are very intentional and deliberate at every stage in our work of reaching out to folks all over the country to share our particular experience and to really try to politicize the movement.
That's right.
Because we think that there is a fairly vibrant cooperative movement that actually exists in this country.
Yes.
I think a lot of it is falling into this notion that, business is supposed to be a neutral kind of activity, and you don't get involved in politics. And we're here to say, no, we have to take a partisan position, and we have to, if we're going to orient these businesses and not have them become just new vehicles of capital accumulation, if they're actually really going to serve working people, then they have to have a working class orientation and working class politics. So that's a particular thing that Cooperation Jackson has been trying to add to the movement as we grow and struggle. And one of the things we always say, people is like, well, what can we do to best help you? And the thing, at the end of the day, we need a strong cooperative movement, a radical movement here in Los Angeles.
I totally agree.
That would give us ultimately the most support, because we can't exist in like a small little progressive isolated bubble. It's too easy to kind of hem in, constrain, and ultimately eliminate if there's no other forces that we can relate to, do business with, and are really pushing for another way of doing business and another way of organizing the world.
Well, how about you and I try to find a way to create a coalition between Jackson and Los Angeles?
Done.
Because we're going to talk about this on the show in the studio when we're next in the studio. So this is going to be a clip you're going to watch right here. We want to do this in actual reality, not just talk about it. So let's keep that channel open on Skype and on Zoom and email, and let's figure out what we can do, because it is political.
Right.
I tell people I don't like politics, but you know what I like even less? Being ignorant and inactive when it comes to political stuff that's connected to everybody's day-to-day life.
Right.
And we're one big family. And this
one small little planet. Yeah,
that's
we got
right.
to share it with each other. Yeah.
And you're right, capitalism, I think we need to have a real honest critique of capitalism. Because it is true, yes, there was a short period of time where boats got lifted. And there is amazing technology that has come out of this period of time. But at the same time, that technology also includes, as you mentioned, technology where we can now destroy the surface of the planet in a very short period of time. That's why people keep talking about the nuclear bombs.
Right.
And also, we've already created technology that's polluted the land, the water, the air. The air. And I saw that. I grew up in Middle America. And as a kid, I remember looking at the lakes and the rivers and the streams. Because I lived in a lot of rural areas and small towns. My father was a minister, so that's where he wanted to go. And I already saw the pollution already existing there. And I remember looking at this brown water, and looking at the trees and all that around it. And thinking, not that long ago, this must have been just absolutely pristine and
clear
beautiful.
and pristine. Yeah, that's right.
And so I knew then, as a kid, something's wrong here.
Yeah, I think we've all known that for a while. But there's this kind of notion that the Earth has, inexhaustible resources when it doesn't.
That's right.
And I think there's also been a fostering of this notion that, hey, either technology is going to solve all of our problems, it'll, suck all the carbon out of the air when we need to, or, we'll just come up with some new techno fix. And that's not going to happen.
No.
And we shouldn't allow it to happen, in part because, we got to think of who owns and controls of these technologies.
That's right.
Because they can choose to clean your neighborhood, but not choose to clean mine.
That's right. That's right.
So, one of the things that we fight for is we're not against technology, but it needs to be both appropriately applied, but also more democratically owned and controlled.
Exactly.
And we think if it's done that way, there'll be far less pollution because we'll all be mindful. Hey, I don't want toxic waste in my backyard, and I'm sure you don't want it in yours either.
That's right.
So there's a lot that we have to work for in this regard in terms of thinking about change and acting through it. I think in the next coming years and decades. Again, I say we got to look at it. The time is short. We don't have forever in the day to deal with the climate crisis and the overall social crisis that is already created. I don't think I have to your audience here in California. I'm sure most people are very consciously and painfully aware of the long-term drought the state is now suffering.
Yep.
The loss of trees, the loss of biomass, and the whole ecologies of these. We had 2 or 3 years now of the worst forest fires in California
and
history.
record high temperatures.
Right.
Month after month after month.
Yeah, so, the clarion call should be here already. Now we have to act on and develop a program collectively to deal with it.
Yeah, and I think that we need to have public ownership and collectively speaking of like the solar and the wind.
Absolutely.
And this is being proposed already in the UK with their manifesto,
right.
Labour Party's manifesto, and community gardens, community land trusts. There's so many different things that are already in existence out there. If we can implement them here in our own country, but we have got to politicize this, because think about it, people. We don't even have single payer health care. Russia, China, Saudi Arabia, Israel, all these countries have a government administrated program, and we don't have one.
Right.
And yet we do have one, just not everybody gets access to it.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah. And so, Congress has a great one.
They do.
We should get the same treatment that they get.
That's right, exactly. But to your point of the politicization, we shouldn't be afraid of that.
Right.
We got the New Deal based on fear. When FDR said, you have nothing to fear but fear itself, he said that, by the way, in fear. He knew the real threats that were there for as he called the royal elitists. He was one of them. So, but we need to build a movement. We need to build movements. Even Bernie Sanders talks about that. And then we need to address the major issues as millions of people coming together. It's not going to work. You got 500 people there. And so one of the things that's frustrating to me, Kali, is that I moved back out here 10 years ago, and I went to a climate rally. Was this after Occupy or before? And there were 500 people at City Hall. And I remember thinking, like,
it's not going to cut it.
500 people in the city of 10 million. Yeah. Henry Waxman is really impressed standing here. He had that look on his face, like, 500 people. You need to have the representation of many, many people to make that impact happen. So that's why we have to build multiple movements. And we have to find common ground to simplify the message, but still be
and to build confidence.
Right.
We have to build confidence. I think there's a truth that sad truth that most folks, as the saying goes, most folks find it easier to envision the end of civilization, the end of the world, than they envision, the end of capitalism.
That's right.
And we have to change that.
That's right.
And I think part of that is confidence in our own abilities and a clear vision of the future. And I think we need to really have an honest assessment of the experiences from the 19th and 20th century that we're trying to build, egalitarian, utopian systems where they went wrong, and not look at it as a hindrance, but look at it, that's some rich material for us to learn from, actually.
That's right.
And not be afraid, but to take courage of millions of people, in many different places try to, take their destiny in their own hands and oftentimes fell short. But let's really analyze why and really interrogate, the capitalist system and imperialism never stopped, or never allowed them to, fully experiment on their own terms. That doesn't negate the internal contradictions that every society has. But we got to put all these things in context, and one thing we do, I think now all clearly know, I understand is that us continuing with this system and this operation, way of operating, way of running society, it's going to kill us all.
That's right, exactly. And we need to really use that kind of, like we were saying earlier, urgency. If my backyard isn't flooded, if there isn't oil coming through my, or whatever it is, like in Flint, right. Coming through the water, nothing's wrong. And we need the sense of urgency, well, it doesn't matter what appears right now, it matters what could happen.
And look at what's happening right now with Hurricane Florence in North Carolina.
Yeah, I know.
Where they rejected climate science as a means of doing any evaluation and planning. And now, they're going to be left with just tons of toxic sludge, from the pig farms and the nuclear facilities that they have and all this other kind of waste. Folks are going to be dealing with that for decades to come now, because a few boneheaded folks in their legislature decided, they were going to go with some ultra-right Christian libertarian narrative of the world that rejects the actual facts that are in front of you, and even deny people from hearing or learning about, those facts. Well, that comes at a cost. Now North Carolina is going to be paying for it, and what I hope is, as an illustration, that folks now from this experience, as terrible as it was and is, will learn and then spread that knowledge to other folks. Like, hey, you got to take this serious. Climate change is here. It's not something that's in the future. It's happening now, and it's having these impacts.
We need to find ways to work together. So that
we have to. Yeah, we have to, absolutely. So I'm looking for more from more, and we'll be in touch.
Absolutely. Yeah. Kali, thank you so much.
Thank you.
This is Nice Wonder, and you're watching the Nowman Show. I'm here with Kali Akuno from Cooperation Jackson.
For the most part, we are only as good as our best party's worst policy. So the people need to be mad.
Right.
What do you see the Green Party's role is in creating these coalitions?
The strategic choice, I think, for progressives is, are you going to waste your time trying the failed experiment of saving the Democrats? Or are you going to work for electoral reform like proportional representation?
I think that we should not reform it. We should change the name to the non-democratic party.
The wealth disparity in this country is absolutely ridiculous. The average CEO makes 475 times the average worker.
That's
and
crazy.
Adam Smith never foresaw this, by the way.
California can do what every other democracy does, and that's have universal single-payer health care. It's going to save, they've estimated it's going to save like $3 trillion over 10 years. And,
oh my gosh.
And if we
Listen
do it
to
here,
that, $3 trillion. That's how many zeros?
that's a lot of zeros.
If there were a movement in the United States, something like the CIO, the socialists, and the communists in the 30s, we could take major steps to democratize our enterprises. If the workers together decide whether a company leaves town, guess what? They're not going to leave. If you were afforded the opportunity to keep your job here in LA or to have one on the outskirts of Shanghai, my guess is, in most cases, you'd prefer to stay here. You want to deal with the problem of export of jobs, democratize the enterprise like that. Here's another example. A toxic technology that makes more profits but really fouls the earth. If the company decides, the board of directors, they choose the profitability because that's their pressure. But if the workers themselves decide, would they be interested in more profits? Sure. But they'd also be worried about what they and their spouses and their children and their neighbors have to breathe or drink or eat. And you're going to see some ecological sensitivity of the sort we never see here. And here's the big one. What's the biggest source of income and wealth inequality in America? It's the distribution of profits. It's not the occasional athlete or actress who gets a wild salary. It's the way we distribute the surplus, the profits. In a modern corporation, remember I told you we'd come back to this. In a modern corporation, the board of directors decides how to distribute the surplus. And, surprise, surprise, they give a lot of it to themselves in sky-high executive salaries. Suppose the distribution of the surplus were decided democratically. You think the workers democratically would decide to give 4 or 5 individuals everything while everybody else has to borrow to put their kid through college? Unlikely. You want to do something about inequality? Let's not have the umpteenth war on poverty by the umpteenth president, none of which work. We're in the 50th anniversary of Lyndon Johnson's war on poverty, and we got precious little to show. You want to do something about inequality of income and wealth, then don't keep inventing laws and rules to redistribute the wealth and the income. Don't maldistribute it in the first place. Then you won't have to have a debate about which is the better way to redistribute. Don't do that. Don't allow it to be distributed that way in the first place. And a democratic distribution. And what am I asking for? All the workers together produce the profit by their efforts. Nothing would be more obvious than to let all of those who contributed to produce them decide what to do with them. Not only would it undo the inequality that tortures us as a nation, not only would it realize democracy, but it would mean we had finally outgrown and overcome the capitalist organization of enterprises that explains the rise, the decline, and the crisis of this system. I am a critic of capitalism for all of these reasons. What mystifies me most is how anybody can have any other perspective. Let's really be clear here. Capitalist organizations, capitalist enterprises are formed by the thousands every day, and they collapse and disappear every day. So there's nothing about a capitalist enterprise that guarantees it will succeed. They face all kinds of problems, and many of these problems are not successfully solved. My expectation is that among worker-owned enterprises, there'll be a good number of them who make all kinds of bad decisions, mistaken decisions, and that will not survive. In other words, we're not suddenly going to have every enterprise wins the prize and lasts forever because it converts from one form to another. That's not the argument, number one. Number two, capitalist corporations have certain advantages in a competition between capitalist and worker co-op. Suppose you have a capitalist bakery and a worker co-op bakery, or a capitalist software producer and a worker co-op. But the advantages of the capitalist over the co-op are offset by the reverse set of advantages. Advantages of the co-op over the capitalist. For example, a capitalist enterprise typically has to make profits, that surplus that I told you about before. But it has to do that in part to take a portion of those profits and give it to the share owners. If a worker enterprise is set up by the workers, there are no shareholders, and they don't have to distribute anything to the shareholders. So they have a portion of that surplus available to redevelop their company, to become more productive, to invest in machines, to do all kinds of things with money that would not be comparably available to a capitalist enterprise. Let me give you another one. A worker co-op, the workers are the employers as well as the workers. They are on both sides. That then gives them, and here I'm just using a basic American idea. If it's your own company, you feel about it differently than if it isn't. Your attitude to a company where you are the employer as well as the employee is different from your attitude towards a company where you are just an employee. That stapler you notice on your way home last Friday might be, of course, no one in this room would do that, but other people might snatch that stapler, stick it in the back of their coat, and have another stapler for use at home, and then be amazed next Monday to discover a missing stapler, right? But if it's your own enterprise, what are you doing? This is going to be understood in a different way. So in other words, your attitude, and that includes your noticing a better way to do something, because it's your own company. If you make the company more profitable, you gain. If you make the company more profitable and you have an employer, they gain. You may not gain at all. So when you put it together, it turns out, not that the balance is so clear, but it's a different set of incentives, a different set of advantages that a worker co-op has, and those give it a certain competitive edge, even as the capitalist enterprise has a certain greater competitive edge. Capitalist enterprise doesn't like a worker, you're fired. A worker co-op, the relationships there are much more complicated. You don't just fire people. But again, the bottom line, the Mondragon Corporation went from 6 workers in 1956 to 100,000 workers today. At every step of the way, the Mondragon Cooperatives, they're a family of about 250 cooperatives, the Mondragon Cooperatives were competing with capitalist enterprises in the market. And the Mondragon Cooperatives often won. That's why they grew. So we have an empirical example that this kind of competition can work very nicely, thank you, for cooperatives. American people across the board understand what I'm talking about, sympathize with it, and want to go. We have everything in place for real change to begin to happen. All it takes is to take that next step from understanding it and feeling it, seeing it, and now producing the political power of organized people to realize these changes. I know part of what I've told you is depressing. You've had to face a reality about a system you live in and upon which we all depend. But I want you to go away with a sense, as I have it, that we are at a time of momentous political possibilities, the likes of which I have never seen in my life before, from the time I was born in Youngstown, Ohio, to this minute. I am enormously optimistic and positive about what is now possible that I never dreamed until a few years ago I would see in my lifetime.
Congratulations to Kali Akuno for being the recipient of the 2023 Gandhi Peace Award.
Here on the Nowman Show, we've been covering all kinds of solutions, and a lot of the time focusing on cooperation, cooperatives, worker-owned cooperatives, or worker self-directed enterprises. We're on the Aurora channel. We also have content that's out on Rumble, and as well as on YouTube and Odyssey. We've had content from Works, Worker Owner Resources Cooperative Services here in the LA area. We've had people in panel discussions, content from the National Federation of Co-ops Convention that was at LA Trade Tech, the trade school a few years ago. I interviewed Kali Akuno from Jackson Rising in Mississippi, representatives from the Arizmendi bakeries, and more in Bay Area, Northern California. And there's more to check out Professor Richard Wolff's Democracy at Work website as well. It's part of the solutions going forward. And let us know what you think. And also check out my new documentary, New Renaissance. I include solutions in that, as well as a lot more. We need enlightenment. We need economic, spiritual, artistic, cultural, political. It's all about Renaissance and opening up and welcoming everyone, because we are one whole. This is Dan Nowman Nice Wonder. And always stay present in the moment, here now.
Arizmendi, what is that for those who may not know exactly what that is?
Arizmendi is the shortened version of a priest from Spain, post-Civil War, post-Spanish Civil War, Father Jose Arizmendi Arrieta. So we shortened it for ease of saying and for marketing value.
Yeah.
And so we he had started the Mondragon Collectives to do job creation and business growth in the Basque region of Spain after the Spanish Civil War. He helped jumpstart the largest network of cooperatives in the world, and you could still look them up. And it was an homage to him to name the bakeries Arizmendi.